spaceship rattled as it entered the atmosphere of the small, unfamiliar planet. John, a human explorer, held tightly to the controls, his heart racing. Years of training had prepared him for danger, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to find. The planet's surface was dotted with strange, glittering plants, and the sky shimmered with colors that did not exist back on Earth. It was beautiful. But John had learned long ago that beauty often hides danger. The mission was simple: land, collect samples, and return. But when John stepped out of his ship, the world felt alive. The ground beneath his boots seemed soft, almost sponge-like, and the air smelled sweet, like blooming fruit. As he walked further, a small movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a shadow of a bird, but then he realized it was something far stranger, a tiny creature. No taller than a human child, peeked from behind a glowing shrub. Its skin shimmered like silver, and its eyes were large and round, reflecting the colorful sky above. John froze. His first instinct was to raise his scanner, but something in the alien's expression made him hesitate. It looked curious, not threatening. John crouched down slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Hello," he said softly. "I mean no harm." The alien girl tilted her head, her tiny mouth opening in what could only be described as a laugh. John was stunned. She laughed. He had read about alien communication through sound and gestures. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. He remembered the small rations he always carried. From his pack, he took out a bottle of milk, a simple human drink. But sometimes simple things could bridge worlds. He poured some into a small cup he had used for samples and held it out. The alien girl stepped closer, her tiny feet barely making a sound on the soft ground. She sniffed the milk, her eyes widening, and then, with an expression of pure delight, she giggled again. John laughed, relief washing over him. It was a small victory, but in this strange world, trust was priceless. He watched as she took the cup and sipped carefully. Then, in a gesture that seemed almost human, she nodded her head as if to say thank you. John realized something profound, even in the far reaches of the galaxy. Gestures of kindness were universal, as the alien girl drank. John took out a small notebook to record his observations. Her laughter echoed across the colorful landscape, blending with the gentle hum of the planet. John wrote quickly, careful not to disturb her. He described the way her skin reflected light, the size and shape of her eyes, and the unexpected warmth in her behavior. This was a discovery beyond science. It was a connection. Hours passed, and the alien girl became more comfortable with John's presence. She began to move around him, examining his equipment with fascination. She tapped at his scanner, tilted her head at the blinking lights, and made soft cooing sounds. John realized she was trying to communicate in her own way. He smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and humility. In all his years as an explorer, he had never felt such a direct bond with a being from another world. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. John looked up to see a group of larger creatures emerging from the forest. Unlike the tiny alien, these were tall and imposing, with armored skin that glinted like metal. John's heart raced. He knew he had to protect the tiny girl, but he also had to be careful. One wrong move could turn curiosity into aggression. The tiny alien girl clung to John's leg, making soft, frightened sounds. John knelt down, speaking to her softly. "It's okay. Stay close to me." He raised his hands to show he carried no weapons, hoping the gesture would be understood. The larger aliens paused, tilting their heads, seemingly studying him. John realized they were intelligent, aware of him and the tiny girl. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, surprisingly, the larger alien stepped aside, allowing John and the small alien girl to pass. John exhaled slowly, relief flooding his body. He glanced down at her, and she looked back at him, eyes shining. He understood that they recognized his kindness and his willingness to protect her. John continued walking, careful to keep the tiny girl close. As they moved deeper into the forest, he noticed the landscape changing. The plants became taller, their colors even more vivid, and the ground seemed to pulse slightly under his feet. It was as if the planet itself was alive, aware of their presence. The tiny alien girl began to guide him. She moved confidently, showing him paths through dense foliage, avoiding hidden dangers. John realized she must have grown up on this planet, familiar with every twist and turn. Her laughter and playful gestures made the journey lighter. Even in the unknown environment, by late afternoon they reached a clearing with a small pool of clear, sparkling water. The girl immediately ran to it, splashing and laughing. John watched, amazed at her joy. He realized that, in this moment, he was not just a visitor. He was a part of her world. He knelt by the pool, filling a small container with water for his samples. The tiny alien girl mimicked him, scooping water with her hands and letting it fall back into the pool. John smiled. This simple act of sharing, of mirrored behavior, was another step toward mutual understanding. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest, John knew it was time to return to his ship. He gently called to the alien girl, signaling that they would leave soon. She hesitated, looking back at the forest, then at him. Finally, with a small nod, she followed. On the way back, John thought about the implications of what he had discovered. This tiny creature, so small and seemingly fragile, possessed intelligence, curiosity, and the ability to form bonds with beings from other worlds. It was a reminder that heroism did not always come from strength or firepower. Sometimes it came from kindness, patience, and the courage to reach out across differences. When they reached the ship, John carefully helped the tiny girl inside a safe container, making sure she had enough space to move. He activated the life support systems and prepared for takeoff. As the engines roared to life, the alien girl looked at him, her large eyes filled with what seemed like gratitude. She tapped her chest, then his. In a gesture that John understood immediately, friendship. As the ship lifted off, John glanced down at the colorful world below. He knew he had made a discovery that would change humanity's understanding of life in the universe. But more than that, he had formed a bond that transcended species. A bond built on trust, curiosity, and a shared moment of kindness, a simple act of offering a glass of milk. John sat back in his chair, the tiny alien girl resting quietly nearby, and let himself feel something rare for a human explorer. Hope. Hope that, even in the vast, unknown reaches of space, humans could find friends, allies, and moments of wonder. The journey ahead was uncertain, and many challenges awaited. But John knew one thing for certain. He would never forget the tiny alien girl who laughed at his simple gift, and the lesson she had unknowingly taught him about compassion, courage, and the power of small acts to create great connections. The ship hummed quietly as it left the planet's atmosphere. John watched the colors of the alien world fade into the blackness of space, but he could still feel the memory of the tiny girl's laughter echoing in his mind. He glanced at her resting safely in the container he had prepared. She opened one eye, her small hands reaching toward him as if to ask, "What's next?" John smiled. Realizing that the adventure had only just begun, he activated the ship's navigation system and began plotting a course toward a nearby research station. The plan was to study the planet from a safe distance, document the ecosystem, figure out how to communicate more effectively with the aliens. But John also knew that sending the tiny girl alone would be dangerous. She had trusted him, and he was determined to protect her. Hours passed as the ship moved through the calm void of space. John used the time to review the data he had collected on the planet. The flora and fauna were unlike anything humans had ever seen. The plants seemed to respond to sound, light, and touch. The animals were intelligent, social, and capable of complex behaviors. But the most remarkable discovery was the tiny girl herself. She had a level of intelligence and emotional depth that suggested her species could one day communicate with humans on equal terms. John turned his attention back to her. The alien girl had grown more comfortable in her container, exploring it carefully with her small hands. She tapped on the walls, looked at the instruments, and occasionally made soft cooing sounds. John realized she was curious about everything, just like a human child, but with a level of awareness and understanding far beyond what he expected. By the time they arrived at the research station, John had formed a plan. He needed to introduce her to other scientists, but carefully. The human team would need to learn how to communicate with her and understand her world. Most importantly, they had to respect her and her intelligence. John had seen too many first contact missions fail because humans assumed superiority. He would not make that mistake. The docking process was smooth, and soon John carried the tiny girl into the lab area. The scientist gasped at the sight of her. She was small, delicate-looking, but her eyes shone with intelligence and curiosity. John introduced her carefully, explaining that she was not a threat, that she had helped him navigate her world, and that she could communicate in ways humans were only beginning to understand. One of the senior scientists, Dr. Ramirez, stepped forward, skeptical. "Are we sure it's safe to have her here?" she asked. John nodded. "I've observed her behavior for hours. She responds to kindness, curiosity, and logic. Aggression only comes from misunderstanding. If we treat her properly, she is no danger." The scientists agreed to try a careful approach. They set up a controlled environment, allowing the tiny girl to explore safely while they observed her behavior. John provided the milk, which had already become a small bridge of trust between them. She drank it calmly, then looked around at the humans, tapping lightly on the edge of her container as if to say, "I am ready to learn." Over the next several days, John worked with the team to develop a system of communication. They used light signals, sounds, and simple gestures. The tiny girl responded quickly, learning the patterns and even creating new signals of her own. It was clear she was intelligent, resourceful, and adaptable. John felt a sense of pride not because she was his responsibility, but because humanity was witnessing a truly remarkable mind from another world. One day, while studying a holographic map of her home planet, the tiny girl pointed at a specific region and made urgent, excited gestures. John and the team quickly realized she was trying to communicate a danger. Her world was not entirely safe. Some predators or perhaps rival species threatened her home. John understood immediately. This was not just an opportunity to study her. It was a responsibility to help protect her species. John proposed a plan. He would return to her planet with a small team using non-lethal methods to explore and secure the areas she indicated. The goal was to observe, document, and protect, not to conquer or interfere. The scientists agreed, impressed by John's careful and humane approach. When they arrived back at the planet, John felt a surge of anticipation. The tiny girl led the way, confident and precise. She moved through the forest with ease, pointing out hidden paths, unusual plants, and signs of danger. John marveled at her knowledge of her world. She seemed to understand the ecosystem in a way humans could only aspire to. Suddenly, they came upon a group of larger aliens, the same kind John had seen before. They appeared aggressive at first, but the tiny girl stepped forward, standing confidently despite her small size. She made a series of gestures and sounds, and to John's surprise, the larger aliens paused. They recognized her authority. John realized that her species had social hierarchies, and even small individuals could command respect through courage and intelligence. John took careful notes, ensuring the team understood the interaction. They observed from a distance, careful not to interfere. It was a lesson in humility. Human technology and strength were impressive, but respect, courage, and understanding could achieve things no weapon ever could. As the team moved deeper into the forest, they discovered new wonders. Bioluminescent plants glowed in rhythmic patterns, seemingly communicating with each other. Small creatures moved in intricate dances, perhaps a form of social or even artistic expression. John felt awe and excitement. Humanity had discovered not just life, but a complex, vibrant world full of intelligence and beauty. That night, John set up a temporary camp. He shared stories of Earth, simple tales of human courage. And the tiny girl listened attentively, occasionally tilting her head or making a soft sound in response. John realized that she was not just learning from them. They were learning from her. She taught patience, curiosity, and the importance of understanding before acting. Over the following weeks, John and the team worked tirelessly to document the ecosystem, develop safe observation techniques, and build trust with the inhabitants. The tiny girl became a symbol of cooperation and mutual respect, showing that even the smallest being could influence the actions of many. One evening, as John looked out over the glowing forest, he reflected on what had changed. He had come to the planet as an explorer, seeking data and samples. He was leaving with a deeper understanding of life, courage, and the bonds that could form across worlds. He realized that heroism was not always about battle or conquest. Sometimes it was about connection, protection, and the willingness to treat others with respect, no matter how different they were. The tiny alien girl climbed onto John's shoulder, her eyes bright. She pointed toward the horizon, then toward him, and finally made a gesture that John understood clearly. "You are my friend." He smiled, feeling a warmth he had not expected. This was more than discovery, it was a bridge between worlds, as the expedition concluded. John knew that humanity had much to learn from this planet and its inhabitants, but he also knew that he had made a promise to protect, to respect, and to maintain the fragile trust that had been built. He looked at the tiny girl who had grown from a curious stranger into a brave guide and felt gratitude. She had taught him as much as he had taught her, proving that intelligence and courage come in many forms, and that even the smallest being can inspire greatness. As the ship lifted off once more, leaving the glowing forests behind, John felt a sense of accomplishment. He had explored, learned, and connected. He had faced danger and uncertainty, but kindness, courage, and curiosity had carried the day. Humanity's story was richer for it. John knew this was only the beginning. The tiny alien girl laughed softly, a sound that echoed across the empty cabin. John looked at her and laughed too, realizing that this simple, joyful sound was a universal language. In that moment, he understood that no matter how far humans traveled, the greatest discoveries were not just about new worlds. They were about the hearts and minds they encountered along the way. John set the ship on a course back to Earth, carrying not just data, but a story of connection, courage, and the reminder that heroism often lies in small acts of care. The tiny alien girl rested nearby, her eyes closed, dreaming perhaps of her own home or the adventures yet to come. And John, the human explorer, knew that in the vastness of space, humans could make a difference not through weapons or power, but through compassion, understanding, and the willingness to see the extraordinary in every being, no matter how small. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, but John felt ready. Humanity had taken its first steps toward true friendship with another intelligent species, and the tiny alien girl had been the guide, teacher, and inspiration. Together they had shown that courage, empathy, and curiosity were universal traits, capable of bridging worlds and creating a story worth telling for generations. And as the ship disappeared into the blackness of space, John silently promised himself that he would never forget the tiny alien girl who had laughed at a simple glass of milk and who had, in doing so, reminded him what it truly meant to be human.